This is Jim from eNovelAdvisor.com, and in this series of short, easy-to-understand videos, we're going to use the movie adaptation of George Orwell's novel 1984 to come to a deeper understanding of story structure and how you can use the elements to write compelling fiction. Now, there are differences between the movie and the novel, but that doesn't matter because what we're going to look at are the specific elements that go into creating any story so that you can take those elements and use them to write compelling fiction. Very specifically, we're going to talk about plot questions, conflict, and pacing, and how you can use those elements to captivate your reader's imagination. Now, as you watch this first episode, ask yourself what works and what doesn't. The first thing you might notice is that the story moves much more slowly than you're used to and that you'd actually like. It's kind of boring. But use that to your advantage. Ask yourself what you would do to make this story more interesting to your reader. Now, I'll make occasional comments on the things I want to draw your attention to, and I'm sure you'll have comments as well, so please leave those in the discussion box below. Pretty soon you'll get a solid understanding of the things that go into making up a story and how to put those together to keep your readers turning the pages. So, without any further ado, here's 1984. Whether it's a movie or a book, the opening is all about the speed with which you hook your audience and keep them reading or watching. This is why most movies these days have the credits at the end rather than the beginning, and if you're like me, you're probably pretty bored of this movie already. That's understandable. Now let's take this time to see how Orwell captured the reader's attention and kept them reading. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. Now, in the very first sentence, there's a plot question, and a plot question is simply a question that the writer places in the back of the reader's mind so that they keep reading. The plot question in the first sentence is the fact that the clocks are striking 13. This is different from our experience of reality, and we wonder why and how the clocks would be striking 13. So we keep reading this, and this is what you want. As a writer, you must constantly give the readers plot questions to keep them wondering what'll happen next. If you don't, you run the risk that they'll stop reading. What plot questions do you see the movie using? How would you do it differently? Tell us below.
From the devastation wrought by the atomic raids of 1965, three great police states rose to divide the world: Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia. Atomic weapons were abolished, but not war itself. For only by maintaining the strain and tension of continual conflict could the ruling parties enforce absolute power. London, with its bomb-proof ministries, became capital of Airstrip 1, a province of Oceania.
The beginning of a story is also about setting the scene and the mood. Is your story a Western or a futuristic sci-fi story? The reader won't know until you tell them, so it's important to remember. The reader won't know anything until you tell them, so tell them exactly what you want them to know. In the novel 1984, we see in the first paragraph that it's a cold and windy day. This not only sets the scene, but it helps to create mood, and creating mood is important to keeping the readers reading as well. The way the movie sets the scene is through what we see on the screen and the soundtrack. In a story, you would use word choice, sentence, and paragraph structure to convey everything the reader experiences. What words would you use to set the scene? How would you structure your sentences and paragraphs? Tell us in the dialogue box below. Okay, the way these two characters look at each other implies some sexual tension, which is a great way to implement a plot question. The problem is that in this situation, it's just implied, so the audience doesn't really know what to think. Remember, you need to tell them exactly what you want them to know. You need to make them feel exactly the way you want them to feel. So what would you do to make the sexual tension in this scene more dramatic? Would dialogue help? What dialogue would you write to make this interaction more dramatic? Let us know below.
Stand by for an important announcement. The Ministry of Peace is happy to report that thanks to the vigilance of our gallant interceptors, no Eurasian rocket bomb was able to reach targets of any importance. We continue now with our regular broadcast.
Okay, so now we see some more plot questions. Why did he kick the book across the floor? What is he doing in front of the camera lens, and why is he doing it? Now, these are perfectly good plot questions, and Orwell uses them in the book. The problem with the movie version is that they don't carry enough drama. To make these plot questions more interesting, you need to add conflict to your story structure. For example, if he was being chased by someone who wanted to cut him to pieces with the chainsaw, he would run for his life. But if he had to stop and go through this silly ritual in front of the camera lens with his potential killer catching up with him, we would see that it must be as equally as important as his life itself, or he wouldn't be doing it, would he? This increases the dramatic power of the plot question in the reader's mind, and the chance that the reader is going to keep reading. And this gets into the idea of starting things in medias res. Okay, you've done a great job paying attention to a very boring story structure, so we'll stop for today. But you should have learned something about what makes a bad story and how you can restructure some very simple things to make it a more compelling story. Now, you may have even noticed that I just used a plot question myself when I mentioned the term in medias res. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, you might wonder what it means, and I've succeeded in holding your attention for just a little bit longer. Now, just a little bit more about plot questions before I tell you what in medias res means. I actually considered splicing a subliminal video clip in the movie to illustrate how plot questions work.
Sanctuary in the home.
But I didn't because the segment is too short and I didn't want to distract you. But what if I had? You might wonder what that clip was doing there and why it was there, and you might have kept wondering until the end of the video. You see, this is how plot questions work. It's a little mystery that you want the reader to solve in their mind, and he won't solve it until he gets to the end of the book. But I decided not to do it because the movie segment was too short, and I didn't want to distract you from what we were studying. And these are the kinds of things that you need to consider when you're a writer. Just remember Goldilocks when you're writing. You don't want to add too much, which I would have done if I had added that clip during the movie segment. But you also don't want to add too little, which is how the movie was to begin with. You want everything to be just right, perfectly balanced. So now you might have forgotten about me in medias res, but it's in the back of your mind and you're still kind of wondering about that, so let's talk a little bit about that now. As a writer, you always want to start a story as far into the action as possible. And this is what is referred to as in medias res, which is Latin for in the middle of things. For example, If it makes sense in the story, you might want to start the story with the character hanging for his life from the end of a branch. You may even want to have him being hunted by a jaguar. This makes it more dramatic still because you don't know whether the character will die from falling off the tree or whether he'll be eaten by the jaguar. And you keep the reader reading to find out which is your fundamental goal as a writer. You see how conflict works? Okay, this is it for this episode. In the next episode, we'll continue breaking down the story structure of George Orwell's 1984. Now, I want to make sure that these videos are beneficial to you, so please tell me in the discussion box below. Was this helpful to you? What could I do to make it more beneficial to you as a writer learning how to write? And in the meantime, why don't you stop by enoveladvisor.com, your first step to writing a novel and the last word on marketing it. There you'll find a bunch of very helpful resources on not only how to write a novel, but how to publish and market it as well. So until next time, this is Jim.
Visit enoveladvisor.com to publish your own novel. You really can't go wrong. Learn to write a novel and market it. You will find out how easy it is. Turn your dream of writing into reality. eNovel Advisor has everything you need.